At 53, I thought I was on top of the world. My company just closed a $75 million Series D round. I was on the cover of a business magazine that same morning. My assistant brought in champagne. The boardroom clapped. I smiled like a man who had everything. And then I got home. There was no dinner, no lights, just a plain white envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside it, the divorce papers, and a blank sheet of paper. My wife's handwriting at the bottom read, "This is all that's left between us. Nothing." I called my son. He picked up. "Dad, just email me. I'm busy." Click. That's when it hit me I had built a business empire, a team of 300 employees who called me sir. But my own family didn't need me anymore. They had learned to live without me. My office was full of awards. My home was full of silence. I didn't stop right away. I wish I could tell you I had some noble moment of clarity. But the truth is, I kept going, until something broke so loudly, it silenced every excuse I'd ever made. If you've ever told yourself, "I'm doing this for them, stay." Because I told myself that for 20 years, and I almost lost them forever. My name is Daniel Morgan. I'm 53 years old, born in a forgotten corner of Pennsylvania, where winters bit through your bones and dreams froze before spring. My father was a factory worker who drank away most of his paycheck and all of his kindness. I don't remember many hugs. I do remember sirens and shouting, and my mother crying in the laundry room, because it was the only place with a lock. At 16, I made a silent vow I'd never let my future family live that way. Not one more shouted curse. Not one more dinner of government cheese. I wasn't going to survive my life. I was going to escape it. College was my first escape. I got a full ride in computer science, the only kid in my class who didn't own a laptop but aced every exam. I met Rachel in sophomore year. She wore thrift store sweaters and talked about changing the world through poetry. I told her I wanted to change it with code. She said, "Then promise me you'll never become one of them." I asked them, she smiled. Men who chase titles and forget what they're chasing for. I married her 2 weeks after graduation. No ring, just a rented tux and a borrowed dress. We moved into a one-bedroom apartment above a Thai restaurant, and I swore I'd build us a better life. Not for status, not for pride. For safety. For warmth. For everything I never had. My first job paid $45,000 a year, and I treated it like it was the presidency. I arrived before sunrise, left after the janitor. I took every overtime shift, stayed late learning back-end systems no one else touched. Rachel called me her hummingbird, always in motion, always chasing the next drop of nectar. She worked part-time at a library back then, writing on the side. We used to dream out loud about a house with creaky floors, a dog named Peanut, 2 kids who wouldn't flinch at raised voices. Every night I'd tell her, "Just give me a few years, then we'll breathe." We had our first child, Caleb, 2 years in. I still remember holding him for the first time thinking, this is it. This is what I was made for. I promised him silently, the way I once promised myself, that he'd never feel unsafe, that he'd never see what I saw. When Caleb turned 1, I got recruited by a fast-rising tech firm in San Francisco. They offered double my salary and a lead engineer title. Rachel hesitated. Is this what we really want, or is it just what success looks like to them? It's not about them, I told her. It's about giving you and Caleb everything. We moved. I started working 18-hour days. I told myself it was temporary. I told Rachel that too. Just until the product launch. Then we'll slow down. Then I'll take nights off. She believed me, at least at first. She believed in the fire behind my eyes, not the paycheck. That's the thing I never forgot. She fell in love with the man who wanted to protect, not the one obsessed with performance. Years blurred. Titles changed. Junior engineer became director of development. Income doubled, then tripled. We bought the creaky house just like we said. We even got the dog Peanut turned out to be a neurotic beagle with a bark like a smoke alarm. But somewhere along the way, the dreams got quieter. Rachel wrote less. We talked less. Caleb grew, and I missed his first steps because I was at a tech conference pitching a vision I barely believed in anymore. Still, I told myself it's all for them. All of it. The hours, the distance, the missed dinners. I was building the fortress. I just didn't realize I was locking myself out of it. The first time I missed Caleb's birthday, I told myself it would be the last. He was turning 6. Rachel had planned a small party in our backyard, just a few kids from school, a dinosaur cake and balloons shaped like meteors. I had every intention of being there. The meeting that morning was supposed to last an hour, maybe 2, but it ran long. Then came a call from a client in Tokyo. By the time I got to my car, the sun was setting, and I was driving home with a gift-wrapped telescope and a rehearsed apology. Caleb was already in bed. Rachel met me at the door. She wasn't angry. That almost made it worse. "You missed cake," she said gently. "He kept asking when you'd show up." "I'll make it up this weekend," I said. "We'll go to the planetarium. I'll take the whole day off. I promise." She nodded, but her eyes didn't. The planetarium trip never happened. That weekend became the next sprint launch. The next sprint led to another investor pitch. Before I knew it, I was saying next weekend like it was some sacred ritual, always coming, never arriving. But here's the thing about Rachel, she stayed kind. That's how she broke my heart. Not with shouting or slammed doors, with patience, with silent belief that I'd eventually come through. And Caleb. God, he still looked at me like I was some kind of superhero. Even after I missed his piano recital. Even after I forgot about the school open house. Even after I didn't show up for the father-son camping trip he'd been excited about for weeks. "You're busy, right?" he said, when I tried to apologize. "It's okay, Daddy. I told everyone you had to work. They said that's what important dads do." That sentence gutted me. Rachel told me once during one of our late-night kitchen conversations when the house was still, and the world felt small enough to hold in our hands, that she used to write. Real writing. Novels. Stories. She'd finished a full manuscript the year before we got married. I didn't even know that until 10 years later. "Why didn't you try to publish it?" I asked. She smiled, stirring tea. "Because then Caleb was born. And you were building something, and someone had to make sure the house didn't fall apart." I stared at her, then realizing something I should have seen long before she'd shelved her dream for hours. And somewhere along the line, I'd made it mine alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked into Caleb's room and watched him sleep, his arms wrapped around a toy astronaut I'd bought online but never played with him. I wondered what memories I was missing while I chased numbers on spreadsheets. I told myself I was providing. But I was starting to suspect I was just hiding from fear, from failure, from the messy work of being present. Still, I didn't stop. I couldn't. Success wasn't just a goal anymore, it was my justification, my excuse, my religion. Rachel never used the word resentment. She never called me out. But she started writing again, short essays, blog posts. I found one once unpublished on her laptop. It was titled, "The Wife of the Hustle." In it she wrote, "He tells me it's all for us. That the late nights, the missed dinners, the silence, it's the price of building something lasting. But I wonder if what he's building includes a place for us, or if we're just scaffolding, he'll remove once the tower is finished. I didn't tell her I read it. I couldn't. Because the worst part was I didn't know the answer. The day I became CEO was supposed to be the proudest of my life. The boardroom buzzed with handshakes, champagne flutes, clinking flashbulbs popping. My name was etched on the door of the corner office. My assistant handed me a Mont Blanc pen with my initials engraved. The team applauded. My inbox overflowed with congratulations. Someone from Forbes requested an interview. And yet driving home that night, the only sound in my car was the low hum of the air conditioner. I remember thinking this should feel like arrival. Instead, it feels like I'm headed nowhere. When I walked through the front door, the house was dark. Caleb was upstairs, the hallway light on. Rachel was in the living room reading under a blanket. She looked up at me, her face unreadable. "I got it," I said, forcing a smile. "They made it official." She closed her book. "I know. I thought we could go out this weekend. Just the three of us. Celebrate." She didn't answer right away. Then she said softly, but clearly, "Em yeo một người, tung commat au buổi tối. Không phải ông chu công ty." I froze. The words hit harder than I expected. Not shouted, not thrown, just placed carefully like a scalpel. I tried to laugh it off. "Come on, Rach. I've worked so hard for this for us." She stood folding the blanket. "You worked hard for a version of us that only existed in your head." That night I lay awake in the guest room. Not because we fought, there was no fight. Just space. Thick, heavy space. I kept thinking about that line. She loved the man who showed up to dinner. When did I stop showing up, not just physically, emotionally? When did I last ask how her day was? When did I last sit with Caleb without checking Slack? When did this house stop feeling like mine? The next morning I found a small envelope on my nightstand. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was still. Inside was a handwritten note. "If you don't stop, there will be no one left here to wait for you." No name, no date, just those words. I stared at it, trying to decide if it was a warning or a goodbye in slow motion. At work, everyone treated me like royalty. My schedule was booked weeks ahead. Investors flew in to shake my hand. Employees quoted me in town halls. But back home, I couldn't get my wife to meet my eyes. Caleb barely spoke unless spoken to. One night, I brought home a brand new gaming system I heard Caleb mention once. He unwrapped it, smiled politely, said thanks, and then went back to his room. Rachel stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing dishes. I walked over and said, "Did you see he was happy?" She didn't look up. He was being polite. That's not the same thing. I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died. Because I knew she was right. Success had become a fortress I built for my family, but in the process I forgot to build doors for them to walk through. I thought protection meant money, security, prestige, but they wanted connection, presence, attention. One night I stayed home early, made dinner, even set the table. Rachel walked in, saw the candles, the plates, the attempt. She smiled faintly. "What's the occasion?" "Just wanted to have dinner, like old times." We sat, ate, talked. For a moment it felt like something real. But as we cleared the plates, she said, "One dinner doesn't fix 10 years." And she was right again. That note stayed on my nightstand for weeks. I looked at it every morning like a countdown. "If you don't stop, there will be no one left here to wait for you." The terrifying part wasn't that she might leave. It was realizing that maybe she already had. I started coming home earlier. At first it was twice a week, then 4, Then almost every night by 6:30 I'd be pulling into the driveway. I'd walk into the kitchen hoping for some version of warmth. A laugh, a glance, something. Rachel would be at the stove humming quietly, flipping something in a pan. She still cooked dinner, still asked Caleb about school, still cleaned up after meals. But it was like watching someone perform a role they'd rehearsed too long. There was a script to everything, polite, calm, functional. She smiled. But it wasn't for me. Caleb, now 14, barely looked up from his phone when I came in. "Hey, champ," I said one evening, setting my briefcase down. "Hey," he muttered, eyes fixed on his screen. "Homework done, yup. Anything I can help with? Nope." That was the routine. Polite, efficient, empty. Then came the school call. "Mr. Morgan," the vice principal said over the phone, "we noticed Caleb's been absent 4 times this month. His attendance is slipping." "What are you sure?" I asked. "Yes. He's also dropped out of SAT prep. Says he's focusing on music now." I paused. "Music, yes. Guitar. He's very talented, apparently." I hung up, stunned. Caleb had never mentioned guitar, or music, or skipping school. That night I brought it up at dinner. "I got a call from school," I said, keeping my tone even. "They said you've been missing classes." He looked up calm. "I'm not skipping. I just go to the music room sometimes instead." "You can't do that." "Why not?" "I'm not failing anything." "You dropped SAT prep. I don't want to go to college." "Not yet." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "That's not optional, Caleb." Rachel stepped in gently. "Dan, maybe we should just listen to what he..." "No," I snapped. "He doesn't get to decide that." Caleb stood up, grabbed his plate, and walked to the sink. "You're here 2 weeks, and now you're suddenly parenting cool." He went upstairs. The slam of his door echoed in my ribs. I turned to Rachel. "You knew, didn't you?" She didn't deny it. "He talks to me. He always has." I said nothing. There was nothing to say. Later that week, I came home early again. But Caleb wasn't there. "He's at Gary's," Rachel said. "Who's Gary, the neighbor?" "2 houses down. His wife passed a few years ago." I frowned. "Why is Caleb at his house? He plays guitar there." "Gary used to be a musician. He's been teaching him." I stood frozen. "You're okay with this?" She nodded. "Gary's kind. He listens. He shows up." It hit me like a punch. I walked upstairs and sat on Caleb's bed, staring at his posters, bands I didn't recognize, lyrics I'd never read. There were sketches on the desk, chord charts, set lists. I'd missed all of it. The next day, I waited for him on the porch. When he came home, guitar case slung over his back, I stood. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he replied, walking past me. I followed. "I'd like to hear you play sometime." He stopped. "You've never asked before." "I know. I'm asking now." He looked at me for a moment, measured, guarded. "Maybe." He disappeared into the house. Later that night, I looked out the window and saw him laughing with Gary in the driveway. Gary handed him a tuner, ruffled his hair. That used to be me. But now I was just a visitor in my son's life, a man trying to get back into a house he once owned. There was a time when Caleb used to ask Dad, "Are you coming home for dinner?" He asked it like it mattered, like my answer could change his whole day. That stopped. Now dinner happened whether I was there or not. No place was set for me. No one texted to ask if I was close. If I showed up, I was an extra plate. If I didn't, no one asked why. Rachel still cooked, still smiled, still asked Caleb about school. But she never asked me about work anymore. Never asked about my meetings, my clients, the deals I used to boast about. Her silence was clean, unbothered, practiced. One night I walked in a little later than usual. I'd stopped for wine, trying to recreate the kind of gesture that used to mean something. Caleb was already done eating. He passed me in the hallway without looking up from his phone. Rachel sat at the table typing on her laptop. "I brought your favorite," I said, placing the bottle down. She looked up, polite. "Thank you. What are you working on?" "Writing," she said, simple. "Oh," I asked. "Like blogging?" She shook her head. "A story." Something about the way she said it made me pause. "Anything I've read?" She smiled faintly. "Not yet." That was the first signal. I missed it. Another night I found her leaving the house dressed nicer than usual. Light makeup. A hint of perfume I hadn't smelled in years. "Going somewhere?" I asked. "Writing group," she said, grabbing her bag. I blinked. "Like a book club, a workshop. There's a community center that hosts them. You're sharing your stuff with strangers." "They're not strangers," she said. "Not anymore." I watched her leave, wondering why the idea of her reading her words aloud to someone else made my chest feel tight. Caleb started spending more time with Gary. After school, before dinner, even weekends. I told myself it was harmless, just a kid bonding with an old man who played guitar. But it ate at me. One evening I tried to join them. Walked down the block, knocked on Gary's door. Caleb answered, surprised. "Thought I'd stop by," I said. Gary smiled from the living room. "Daniel Wright. Come on in." Inside it smelled like coffee and cedar. Guitars hung on the walls. There were photos of a woman, clearly Gary's late wife, and a cluttered desk covered in sheet music and books. Caleb played a short melody. Gary nodded in approval. "He's got an ear for it," Gary said. "Better than I had at his age." I stood there, awkward, unnecessary. On the walk home, Caleb said nothing. Neither did I. The next night, Rachel was typing again. I sat across from her. "What's the story about?" I asked. She paused. "A woman who remembers who she used to be." I nodded, unsure what to say. "She meets someone," she added after a moment. "Someone like a friend." Rachel looked at me calm. "Someone who listens, who remembers her dreams." It wasn't an accusation. It was just truth, and it cut sharper than anything she could have screamed. "You're seeing someone?" I asked, my voice dry. "No," she said, "but I'm remembering what it felt like to be seen." That was the twist I didn't expect. Not an affair, not betrayal, just rediscovery. She didn't want to hurt me. She wanted to find herself again. And maybe, just maybe, she was realizing that the man she married wasn't the one standing in front of her anymore. I went to bed early that night, alone. I stared at the ceiling and thought about all the signs I had missed. The smiles that didn't reach her eyes. The dinners she stopped waiting for. The way Caleb stopped knocking on my office door. The way my name stopped being said with warmth. They weren't angry, they were done being angry. And that's what scared me most. Because anger means someone still cares enough to fight. Silence, that's the sound of someone walking away. Promotion didn't feel like victory anymore. It felt like insulation, another thick layer between me and the life I used to care about. I was now Chief Strategy Officer, a title shiny enough to distract most people. I traveled less, worked more, and got invited to panels with tech leaders whose names filled business headlines. At conferences, people clapped when I walked on stage. Colleagues called me a visionary. Investors quoted my slides. And yet every night I came home to a house that felt more like an Airbnb than a home. Rachel and Caleb were always somewhere. Upstairs in the backyard walking the dog. They never seemed angry, just unavailable. Like I was a passing neighbor, not a husband or father. But I kept telling myself, this is the grind. It's just a phase. They'll come around when things settle. They didn't. Then came the photo shelf. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I left work early to surprise them with takeout. Thai food, Rachel's favorite. I stepped into the house, arms full of warm bags, calling out, "Dinner's on me tonight." Silence. I set the food down and looked toward the living room. Something was off. The bookshelf, the one Rachel had lovingly arranged with photos over the years, was empty. Not just dusted, cleared. No wedding picture. No Caleb's first day of school. No beach trip photo with Peanut wrapped in a towel like a baby. Gone. My chest tightened. I walked over, staring at the blank spaces where frames had once stood. I heard the garage door open. Rachel came in carrying a box. She paused when she saw me. "Oh," she said. "Didn't think you'd be home this early?" "What happened to the pictures?" I asked. She looked at the shelf, then back at me. "I'm organizing. Some of the frames were old, dusty. You're redecorating something like that." She walked past me, placed the box on the table, and started sorting papers inside. I didn't press. I should have, but something in me didn't want to hear the answer I already feared. Later that week, I found Caleb's closet half empty. At first, I thought he was doing laundry, but the hamper was full. The missing clothes weren't in the wash. I asked Rachel, "Is Caleb cleaning out his stuff?" She barely looked up from her laptop. "He's just packing some things." "For what?" She paused. "We've been talking about staying with my sister for a while. Just for a change of pace." My stomach dropped. Staying. How long? She didn't answer immediately. That silence was its own answer. How long, Rachel? She closed her laptop slowly. "Dan, you come home. You see us here, but you're not with us. You haven't been for years. Caleb and I, we've had to build something without you." "This is our home," I said. "No," she said calmly. "This is your house. We've been living around you, not with you." My throat felt dry. "You're leaving." "We've already talked to a realtor." I stepped back. "Since when?" She looked me in the eye. 3 months. That was the twist, the blow I never saw coming. While I was writing vision decks about the company's future, Rachel had quietly planned hers. I thought they were waiting for me, hoping I'd change. They weren't. They were preparing to leave. I walked upstairs, opened the guest room closet, and found another box, this one labeled with dates, school records, medical files, personal documents, the kind of files you take when you start a new life. In that moment, I wasn't angry. I was numb. I had sleepwalked through the last 5 years thinking presents meant occasional dinners and a steady paycheck. But they had stopped asking for me a long time ago. And now they were almost gone. The pitch was perfect. Months of planning 12 versions of the deck, 3 sleepless nights. I stood in front of a glass wall overlooking San Francisco's skyline, presenting to a panel of venture capitalists worth more than some small nations. If this went through, we'd double our valuation. Maybe triple. Halfway through slide 12, market dominance strategy, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it. Slide 13, customer acquisition cost versus lifetime value. The phone buzzed again. Then again. I glanced down just for a second. Rachel. Text message preview Dan. It's Caleb. Car accident. ICU. They're taking him into surgery. Another one came immediately after. If you're going to finish your slide, don't bother coming. My voice faltered. Someone cleared their throat. I blinked, trying to find the next bullet point. My hands were cold. The screen blurred. I heard myself say, "Apologies. Minor distraction. Let's continue." But inside I was screaming. The meeting ended 42 minutes later. The investors clapped. I shook hands, smiled for a group photo I can't even remember posing for. Then I ran. I don't recall the drive, just the sound of the wind and a single line looping in my head. If you're going to finish your slide, don't bother coming. I burst into the hospital lobby, heart pounding. "I'm looking for Caleb Morgan," I said to the nurse behind the desk. 14. Car accident. Brought in tonight. She typed slowly. "Are you family? I'm his father." She hesitated. "The mother's already upstairs." "ICU. Room 7. Take the elevator." I didn't wait for more. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and panic. I reached room 7 out of breath, chest tight. Inside, machines beeped in slow rhythm. Caleb was pale, unconscious. Tubes ran from his arms. A nurse adjusted a monitor. Rachel sat by the bed, her hand clutching his. She didn't look up when I entered. I stepped closer. What happened? Still no eye contact. A driver ran a red light. Hit him crossing the street. He was walking home from Gary's. I nodded, trying to steady myself. "How bad is it?" She finally looked at me. Her eyes weren't red. They were dry. Empty. "He has a concussion. 2 broken ribs. Internal bleeding. They operated an hour ago. You missed that." I came as soon as I could. Her stare was hard. "You came after the handshake. After the slide." I looked down at Caleb. His face was bruised, lip split. My son. The same boy who used to build Lego rockets with me on Sunday mornings. The nurse returned, glanced at me, then at Rachel. "Is this?" Rachel said nothing. The nurse asked gently, "Are you his legal guardian?" "I'm his father," I said again. She nodded, professional. "We'll need you to fill out some documents. Upstairs admissions." I turned to Rachel. She said flatly, "I already signed everything." Silence. I backed out of the room, stunned. The hallway felt longer on the way back, the world slower, like time was punishing me. I sat in the waiting area, surrounded by strangers, families huddled together, some praying, some crying. Everyone had someone. I had a phone full of voicemails, emails, meeting requests. But in the room that mattered most, I wasn't needed. I wasn't even noticed. A doctor approached. "Are you here for Caleb Morgan?" I stood. "Yes." He flipped through his chart. "Are you the legal guardian?" The words again. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Rachel appeared beside me. "I am." The doctor didn't look at me again. He spoke only to her. I sat back down. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just late. I was irrelevant. Rachel didn't look up when I returned to the ICU. She sat beside Caleb, her hand wrapped gently around his. The machines hummed in the background, steady and indifferent. His chest rose and fell beneath the blanket. A small bandage wrapped his forehead. His face looked younger in the stillness, almost peaceful. I stood by the doorway, not sure if I should enter. Finally, I stepped inside and whispered, "How is he?" Rachel's voice was quiet but firm. "Stable. For now, can I sit?" She didn't answer, but she didn't stop me either. I pulled up a chair across from her. The silence between us felt heavier than the machines around us. After several minutes, she said, "You weren't here when they took him in. When they couldn't stop the bleeding. When he was screaming for someone." I looked at her guilt crawling up my throat. "I was in the meeting." "I didn't," she cut me off. "You were pitching a product while our son was fighting to stay alive." I stared at the floor. "You always said this job was for us," she continued. "But the truth is, it was always for you. We were just the excuse." I opened my mouth, but she wasn't finished. "I filed the papers 2 weeks ago." My stomach turned. "Divorce," she nodded. "Yes." I tried to steady my voice. "But I thought we were trying." "You were visiting," she said. "Trying implies effort, partnership. You didn't try. You checked in." I felt the words land like stones. "I hired a lawyer," she added. "Found a rental, just across the state line. My sister helped." I blinked, dazed. "You're leaving?" She finally looked at me. Her eyes weren't angry, just resolved. "I'm not waiting for the next accident to show you what's important." I looked at Caleb, his hand still limp in hers. "I love him," I said. "You don't even know him," she replied softly. "You don't know what music he plays, what books he reads. You don't know his friends or his fears." "That's not true, it is," she said, cutting me gently, but without hesitation. "You know his GPA, his medical history, his tuition balance, but not him." I looked back at Caleb, willing him to wake up, to say something, anything. Rachel stood gently brushing Caleb's hair back. "I'm going to stretch my legs," she said. "He likes someone holding his hand while he sleeps." She walked out. I reached across and took his hand. It was warm. I felt the weight of every absence in that moment, every missed recital, every bedtime story I outsourced to exhaustion. His eyes fluttered. Slowly, he opened them. "Hey, buddy," I said, voice cracking. "You're okay." "I'm here." He blinked, drowsy, confused. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Where's Mom?" She stepped out. "Just for a minute." He didn't respond. I came as soon as I heard I offered. Silence. "Caleb," I whispered. "I'm sorry." He looked at me. Not angry. Just distant. "You don't have to be sorry," he said. "I do," I insisted. "I missed a lot." He turned his face away. "It's fine. Please," I said. "Talk to me." He closed his eyes. "I don't need you to be here now. I needed you then." I sat back, winded. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't lashing out. He was done. His next words were the ones that broke me. "You're a stranger, Dad. I don't need strangers." I stayed there a long time, holding his hand long after he drifted back to sleep. But I didn't feel like a father anymore. I felt like a ghost. I called in sick for the first time in 18 years. No one questioned it. My assistant replied with a "feel better soon." My phone stayed eerily quiet. The world I had built didn't miss me, not the way I had hoped. I stood in the kitchen, unsure of what to do with myself. The silence in the house was vast. No sounds of typing from Rachel's corner. No guitar riffs from Caleb's room. Just the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the floorboards under my pacing. I walked through the house like a guest. The photos had not returned to the shelf. The spaces where they once hung now collected a thin layer of dust. I wandered into my office, a room I had once treated like a shrine. Awards lined the shelves. Crystal plaques engraved with phrases like Visionary Leader, Innovator of the Year. Framed certificates from Stanford. Wall Street Journal articles with my name in bold. I stared at them and felt nothing. Each was earned, fought for, sacrificed for, but they couldn't hold my son's hand in a hospital bed. They couldn't fix what I'd broken. I sat at my desk, the leather chair still molded to my back. I opened a drawer, searching for what exactly I didn't know. Maybe a notepad. Maybe a clue to who I used to be. What I found instead was a stack of envelopes bound by a thin blue ribbon. 27 of them. Each dated. Each unopened. My name written in Rachel's handwriting. I hesitated, then untied the ribbon. The first was dated October 12th, 2011. You missed Caleb's first piano performance tonight. He kept looking at the door even after the final bow. I told him you were working hard. He said, "Does work mean you love it more than me?" I didn't know what to say. My hands trembled as I opened the second. Parent-teacher night. His teacher asked if you'd be joining. I smiled and lied. Again. I read each letter. His birthday party. The flu he had in 3rd grade. The time he scored his first soccer goal. The night Rachel sat alone watching fireworks from the porch, holding a sparkler in one hand and her loneliness in the other. 27 moments. 27 pleas. All unsent. All unwelcome. She hadn't tried to shame me. She hadn't used them as weapons. She had written them to survive, to release something that she couldn't say aloud anymore. They weren't angry letters. They were heartbreak turned into ink. In one she wrote, "Tonight I watched him sleep and realized he's stopped asking for you. That might be worse than him being mad." And another, "Sometimes I wish you'd come home and scream at me. Slam a door, break a dish. At least I'd know you still felt something." By the time I reached the last letter, dated just weeks ago, my eyes were raw. "You say you're building a future for us. But Dan, we're not in it anymore. You left us behind years ago. I've just finally stopped pretending otherwise." I sat there for hours. I didn't check my email, didn't answer my phone. I just read and reread and listened to the silence press in on all sides. For the first time, I saw the scale of what I had lost, not just a marriage or a son's affection, but years of moments I could never get back. Regret is a quiet thing. It doesn't yell. It doesn't bang on doors. It just waits for you to sit still long enough to feel it. And that day I did. I felt it all. The resignation letter was short. 2 sentences, no grand farewell. To the board, effective immediately, I am stepping down as Chief Strategy Officer. Thank you for the years. I didn't include a reason. I didn't owe them one. But as I hovered over the send button, my hands trembled, not from fear of losing power, but from finally letting go of the thing I had used to define myself for decades. I clicked it. Then I opened another tab and logged into my equity dashboard. I transferred the majority of my shares to a blind trust, sold the rest. My lawyer would handle the tax implications. I didn't care about the valuation anymore. I needed something money couldn't buy back. The next morning, I stood outside Caleb's school. I didn't call ahead. I didn't ask permission. I just stood there, leaning against the fence near the pickup zone. The security guard watched me for a while. Eventually, he walked over. "Can I help you, sir? I'm waiting for my son," I said. "His name's Caleb Morgan." He eyed me. "Kids usually get picked up around 3. "I'll wait." It was 12:07 p.m. He gave me a look but didn't press, just walked back to his post. I waited. For 3 hours I watched parents come and go. I saw kids run into arms, laughter, eye contact, affection exchanged without words. At 3:11, Caleb walked out, headphones on, backpack slung lazily over one shoulder. He saw me instantly. He stopped in his tracks. I stood. He didn't walk faster. He didn't smile. He just approached slowly. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I came to see you." "Why, 'cause I owe you something." He raised an eyebrow. "A real apology," I said. "Not a text, not a gift, just me." He glanced around, embarrassed. "Can we not do this here?" "Then let's walk," I said, gesturing toward the sidewalk. He hesitated, then nodded. We walked in silence for a few minutes. "I quit," I said finally. He looked at me. "What, my job?" "I resigned yesterday." He blinked. "Seriously?" "Seriously." "Why?" "Because I've been chasing the wrong things, and I didn't want to be that guy anymore." He said nothing. "I'm sorry, Caleb," I continued. "Not just for missing stuff, for making you feel like you weren't a priority. You were. You always were. I just lost sight of what that actually means." He walked a few more steps, then said, "I used to wait by the door, for years. Every birthday, every recital. I thought maybe this time." I swallowed hard. "I know, you can't just undo that," he said. "I'm not trying to," I replied. "I'm just asking for a chance to start from wherever we are." He didn't answer, but he didn't walk away either. That night I sat at my desk and wrote Rachel a letter. "Rachel, you don't owe me forgiveness. This isn't a plea or a bargain. It's just the truth. I stepped away from the life we built not to chase a dream, but to hide from the parts of myself I didn't know how to face. You deserved better. Caleb deserved better. I've left the job, sold the shares, burned the altar I worshipped at for too long. I'm not the same man you married, and I'm certainly not the one you've had to live with these past few years. But I'm not him anymore either. You don't have to come back. You don't even have to respond. I just needed you to know I finally stopped. And not because you left, because I realized I was the one who disappeared first." I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and left it on the kitchen table. Then I turned off my phone and waited for nothing. Just for stillness. Rachel didn't respond to the letter. Not the next morning. Not the day after. Not even a text to acknowledge she'd read it. The envelope was gone from the table, and that was the only sign she'd touched it at all. I told myself I hadn't expected anything, that it wasn't about getting a response, it was about owning the truth. But each silent hour that passed tightened something in my chest. Caleb at least didn't ignore me, but I wasn't sure that was a victory. At breakfast, he walked into the kitchen as I set out 2 bowls of cereal. "Want some?" I offered. He glanced at the table. "We don't usually eat together." I thought we could change that. He shrugged. Sure. Why not? Gotta start the performance early. Right, I blinked. What do you mean? He spooned cereal into his mouth and said flatly, the whole new dad thing. You're really going for the full redemption arc. It's not a performance, Caleb. He looked at me, really looked this time. You quit your job. You're making breakfast. You're writing heartfelt letters. Feels like a script. It's not, I said, trying to steady my voice. Okay, just that. One word. Not agreement. Not rejection. Just distance. That afternoon I heard the doorbell ring. Caleb opened it before I got there. Hey, he said, stepping out onto the porch. I followed and saw Gary, our neighbor, standing by the gate, guitar in one hand, thermos in the other. Thought I'd drop off those new strings, Gary said. Thanks, Caleb replied, taking them. You got time to play, Gary smiled. Always. They walked off down the street, easy in each other's rhythm. I watched from the window. That was the twist I hadn't been ready for. It wasn't just that Gary played guitar, or that he had taken an interest. It was that Caleb confided in him, laughed with him, learned from him. The kind of relationship I used to imagine for us, Gary had it now. That night I asked Rachel, does he talk to him? She didn't ask who I meant. She knew. Yes, she said. About personal things. About everything. I sat down at the edge of the couch. Do you? She raised an eyebrow. Do I what? Talk to him. She didn't respond. Are you? I stopped. I didn't want to ask, but I had to. Are you seeing him? She exhaled, slow and measured. He listens. He's kind. He's been there. That's not a no. She met my eyes. It's not a yes either. But it shouldn't matter. You gave up the right to ask that a long time ago. I nodded, taking the hit. I'm not angry, she added. Not anymore. I'm just done hoping you'll become someone else. I'm not trying to become someone else, I said. I'm trying to remember who I was before all this. She looked tired. Then you'll need patience, because we've learned how to live without you. It'll take time to learn how to let you back in. That was fair, more than fair. The next week I kept showing up, quietly. No grand gestures, just presence. I took Caleb to school, sat in on one of his rehearsals with Gary, saying little, just listening. I asked him questions, not about grades or goals, but about chords, about music, about why he loved it. He didn't always answer, but sometimes he did. Small cracks in the wall. Rachel still didn't talk much. But one evening I caught her watching me as I helped Caleb restring his guitar. Her expression wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was uncertain, which for the first time in years felt like hope. The invitation came unexpectedly, almost like a mistake. I was standing at the sink rinsing coffee mugs when Caleb walked into the kitchen, guitar case slung over his back. He didn't look up, just said, "There's a recital Friday. At school, I'm playing." I turned off the faucet. "You want me to come?" He shrugged. "You can, if you want." I froze. Not because of the words he hadn't begged or even asked directly, but because of the absence of resistance. He wasn't pushing me away this time. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Yeah, I'd love to." He nodded once and walked out. Later that evening, I told Rachel. He invited me to his recital. She looked up from her book. Good. Will you be there? I've already seen him rehearse. I think it should be you this time. There was something in her voice, neutral but intentional, a passing of the baton, or a test. Friday came faster than I expected. I ironed a shirt. I actually ironed it like this was a job interview. My hands shook slightly as I drove to the school, arriving 20 minutes early. The auditorium was half full, parents chatting phones at the ready. I scanned the crowd, trying not to feel out of place. Caleb walked onto the stage wearing a dark gray hoodie and jeans, his guitar slung across his chest, like armor. No introduction. No smile. He adjusted the mic, sat on the stool, and looked out over the crowd. Then his eyes met mine, just for a second. And he nodded. That was it. He strummed the first chord, low, slow, deliberate. Then came the melody, soft, haunting, layered with quiet urgency. The audience hushed. The notes floated fragile and fierce at once. Midway through, he leaned into the mic and spoke. I wrote this about someone I used to wait for. It's called If You Stayed. My breath caught. The room went still again. His voice was rough, untrained, but honest. Every word carved a little deeper. I built a rocket out of bedtime stories, launched it in the silence after the door clicked shut. I drew constellations on empty chairs, wrote your name in the margins of absence. If you stayed, would I have learned your laugh instead of guessing if you stayed? Would I still have written this song I couldn't move? Around me, parents wiped tears. A few gasped quietly, but all I could hear was the pounding in my ears. He finished the song, let the final note ring out, then stood and walked off stage. No bow, no glance back, just gone. I sat there long after the applause faded. Rachel met me outside the auditorium, arms folded. He wrote that 2 months ago, she said. Didn't want to show anyone. Said it wasn't finished. But last night he said, maybe it is now. I nodded, unable to speak. She looked at me softer than she had in weeks. You hurt him, she said, deeply. I know, but he played that song in front of 100 people. That's something. I don't know what it means. It means there's still something left in him that wants you to hear it. She handed me a folded piece of paper. I found this in his guitar case last week, she said. I wasn't going to give it to you, but after tonight, maybe you're ready. I took it with shaking hands. She walked away. In the car, I unfolded it. Dad, I used to imagine what it would be like if you showed up one day and remembered how to be you. Not the guy on magazine covers. The one who made pancakes on Saturdays and let me fall asleep on his chest while watching cartoons. If that guy ever comes back, tell him I'm still around. But I'm not waiting at the window anymore. I sat there in the parking lot until the engine went cold. Somewhere between the silence and the song, a crack had opened, small but real. A year passed. The house was quieter now, but not hollow. Rachel still hadn't moved back in, and I hadn't asked her to. We didn't pretend things were fixed. But we did start sharing meals again once a week at first, then more often. Sometimes at the house, sometimes out. Always casual, always on her terms. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. Caleb still spent time with Gary, still played guitar, still wore that same gray hoodie like armor. But he started inviting me in, not all the way, but enough to feel like I wasn't on the outside anymore. One Saturday morning I made pancakes badly. Burnt edges, runny centers. I dropped the spatula and cursed under my breath. Caleb smirked. Mom always said you couldn't cook. Still true, I said, but I figured you'd appreciate the effort. He grabbed a plate, sat at the counter. It's not about the pancakes. No. He took a bite, winced. Definitely not. I laughed. He didn't. He just looked at me and said, You don't have to buy stuff anymore, Dad. No gifts, no tech, no surprises. I nodded. Okay. Just sit. Eat. Be here. So I sat. We ate. The pancakes were terrible. The silence wasn't. Later that evening, Rachel stopped by. She'd just come from her writing group. She looked relaxed, lighter somehow. Not like before, but not burdened either. I have something for you, she said, handing me a flash drive. What's this, my book? I blinked. You finished it. She smiled. 3 days ago. I turned the flash drive over in my hand. You want me to read it? I want you to read chapter 7. I waited until she left. Then I sat down and opened the file. Chapter 7, The Man Who Forgot to Come Home. It wasn't labeled fiction. It didn't need to be. It told the story of a man who built towers from ambition, who carved his worth into the shape of his title, who forgot how to speak his family's language, who returned too late but returned anyway. Each page was a mirror I didn't want but needed. Near the end of the chapter, the wife character writes a letter she never sends. It ends with, You were always enough. You just forgot how to show it. If you find your way back, not to me, but to yourself, I'll be here. Not waiting, just open. I sat there for a long time, the screen glowing in the dark. She hadn't written me back after that first letter. She hadn't promised anything. But she'd written this. That was more than forgiveness. It was belief. That night I didn't dream about boardrooms or bottom lines. I dreamed of pancakes, of chords strummed in a garage, of a quiet dinner table with no gifts, just chairs filled. And somewhere in that dream, a woman sat across from me reading her words out loud and smiling. The morning after Rachel handed me her manuscript, I sat at my desk and wrote one last letter, this time to my successor. It wasn't about strategy or quarterly goals. It didn't mention market trends or innovation pipelines. It wasn't the kind of letter you'd file or quote at an investor meeting. It was just this, Ethan, you've earned this seat. You're smarter than I ever was, and I believe in what you're building. But here's what no one tells you in the handover meetings. This job will take everything if you let it. Your time, your peace, your presence. It will flatter you, reward you, seduce you into believing you're indispensable. Don't believe it. Keep the company. Grow it. Win. But don't do it at the cost I paid. Don't lose your wife without noticing. Don't let your kids stop asking when you'll be home. Because rebuilding is possible, but you'll carry the cracks with you forever. I hit send, then closed the laptop for good. Weeks later, I stood under the bright lights of a TEDx stage red circle beneath my shoes, the theater packed with faces staring up, waiting to hear the usual tech disruption, visionary buzzwords. Instead, I began with this. If you're like I was 2 years ago, this talk is your warning. Unplug now. Not your devices, your ego. A ripple of confused laughter followed. I continued. I was the man who never missed a quarterly target, but missed birthdays, recitals, and dinner tables. I optimized workflows, but forgot how to ask my son how his day was. The turning point. A phone call during a billion-dollar pitch. My son was in the ICU, and I was finishing slide 13. That's who I was. You could hear a pin drop. I didn't hit rock bottom. I coasted right past it. And then I stopped. Not because the world demanded it, because I realized the one I was building no longer included the people I loved. I shared Rachel's letters, the unsent ones, her manuscript, Caleb's song, the silence between us that taught me more than applause ever could. And then I ended with this. I used to say I couldn't stop, that everything I did was for them. But the truth, I didn't stop because I liked who I was when people clapped. Now I still haven't stopped. I just took an exit no one expected. I went home. A standing ovation followed. But the applause didn't matter. What mattered was walking backstage and seeing Caleb waiting, hands in his pockets, trying not to smile. "You didn't suck," he said. "That means a lot." And "Mom cried," he added. "Just a little." I nodded, eyes stinging. "Think she'd be okay if I came over for dinner?" She already set the table.